Good morning, everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good morning. Hope you guys had a good breakfast, had your tea and your coffee. I'd like to welcome everyone to this call to action. Let's call it that. It's not an event, it's a call to action. So welcome to the Climate to Equal call to action. Today, I know the question on everyone's mind is why gender and climate, and what do they have to do with each other? So this is the question that we aim to answer for you today. We're also launching a full program just to kind of support you guys with answering that question and implementing sustainable action. And that's called the Climate2Equal program, which we're launching in partnership with the Pakistan Business Council. So you guys are always hearing from us about gender, right? There's always talk about gender from IFC and the PBC. And today we're talking about gender and climate. And this program is aimed to help you guys, the private sector, to implement sustainable action in the field of gender and climate, right? It's a one-year program. And we as IFC are offering a lot of tools to help you implement that action. So we have workshops coming up. We have a team of gender and climate specialists to help you. We will be providing exposure to companies that enroll in this program. So a lot to do, a lot's coming up. Very excited to have you all, and just welcoming everyone here. Please feel free to ask questions to Fran once she's doing her talk, or to the panel. We want this to be as interactive as possible. And for now, I will welcome Mr. Zishan Sheikh, who is the IFC country manager for Pakistan and Afghanistan, to the stage for his welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalia. Good morning, everyone. And thank you all for being here. Apologies, we're running a little late this morning. I think some logistic issues, but we'll get going. So my name is Zishan. I head IFC for Pakistan and Afghanistan. I've been in this role for about 6 months. And one of the big themes that has come out in this period for us is around climate and gender. So I'm particularly delighted to be here for this event. And really to welcome you all here. I want to, before I get going, acknowledge the Pakistan Business Council. They're a partner for us. We've been working with them for several years, but really in the gender space, they are a champion, and we're very pleased to be engaging with them and look forward to sort of continuing this partnership across various initiatives. What really we're looking to do, and as Dalia and Franz and other more qualified people will talk during the course of today, is really trying to launch a pioneering effort here in Pakistan for gender-inclusive, business-led climate actions. Most of you will know, for Pakistan, gender inclusivity and climate are incredibly important themes. There are many countries where they are important, but I think Pakistan, the combination of the two perhaps is even more acute than what we see in many other countries. So I'm pleased that for us as IFC, Pakistan is one of the first countries where we're launching this Climate2Equal initiative. We're talking about it in a number of other countries in the region, but this is the first one where we're launching it. It really is a reflection of the importance that we hold Pakistan in for IFC. Some of you will be aware that we've been here almost 60 years in terms of our operations. We have an investment portfolio in the country of about $1.7 billion. And we are looking to invest close to $1 billion in Pakistan a year. So doing an annual program of $1 billion, we're working across several sectors and industries, but probably the two most important cross-cutting themes for us across all the sectors we're engaged in is climate change, and gender. And this particular initiative is a continuity of what we're trying to do in that space. And really, what we're doing here is a reflection of what IFC, in terms of its global priorities, is also focused on. Internally, we have KPIs for gender-related engagements, both in advisory and investments. We have climate-related KPIs. All of us have targets we have to meet in this space. So there's a lot of focus on what we can do to support developing countries in these areas. To share with you a couple of numbers, over the last 3 years or so, we've invested almost $8 billion in engagements with a gender-inclusive lens. And about $35 billion in climate-related finance. And really, this is a starting point for us. Our ambition in terms of what we want to do here is much, much more. Pakistan, our approach in Pakistan is similar, and I think many of you will know better than me. Pakistan's issues around gender diversity, gender inclusivity are incredibly acute. I think it's rated one of the lowest in the global gender gap index. I think it's 145 out of 146 based on what I was told. And of course, with what's happened in Pakistan over the last few months, the whole climate change agenda has also come to the fore. So really, and it's great to see that in Pakistan, I think there is an increasing awareness. And I was speaking to Dalia, and she was saying how in Pakistan it's impressive that the private sector in particular is quite progressive when it comes to these topics. What is perhaps less known is the link between climate change and gender inclusivity, and that's really what this initiative is about. There is research out there that talks about the impact that having greater gender or greater female participation in decision-making around climate change. I think that the stat that I have been given basically says that a 10% increase in female participation in terms of decision-making around climate change actions results in about a 5% decrease in CO2 emissions. And this is based on a study of 2,000 listed companies across the world. So there is data around the importance of these two topics at a global level, and I think Pakistan is a good case study in trying to make this happen. So for us, climate change and gender inclusivity and gender equality are very much linked, and really our hope is that this initiative that we're launching today sets the scene and creates a model for others to follow. As Dalia mentioned, I think the idea behind this is to really support private sector groups to think through climate action plans with a gender inclusive lens, and you will hear from much more technically qualified people as to what this means in practical terms. Our hope is that over the next year we will not only advise in this, but help in the implementation of this, and this can be again a part of a broader engagement we have on gender and climate change in Pakistan. I have to say I'm quite impressed, so maybe a confession that I shouldn't make, but I'll make in any case. When this idea was first floated to me some months ago, I was unsure as to the uptake because climate, of course, is a big theme, and so is gender. So putting the two together, I was unsure, and again shows my ignorance on the topic. So as I've read up a little and spoken to the team, I think it's genuinely impressive, and the fact that the room is full is also a sort of a sign of this being a relevant and important topic, and one really that perhaps for us encourages IFC to do more in this space. So you will hear more from us in this regard. I have to acknowledge the companies that are making these pledges today. So as you'll be familiar, a number of companies will make company-specific pledges during the course of today about having a gender angle to their climate action plans. And Fran and Dalia and others will provide some guidance and learnings from other parts of the world as to what sort of ideas would make sense. So I really want to thank those that have stepped up, and I think there are a number that have done that, which you will hear about during the course of today, and I think some more will be added. So it's great. I hope you will be an inspiration for others to follow. You will hear more of this in the coming days from IFC and from other platforms. So really, I want to close once again by thanking you all for being here today, apologizing for the late start, but hopefully we will catch up during the course of this event. And I personally very much look forward to following what comes from this initiative, and also want to thank my own team, Dalia and others, and Fran, who've traveled from other parts of the world, as well as PBC colleagues who really are a champion for the gender agenda in Pakistan, and we're proud to be partnering with them. So thank you, and I wish you a good event.
Thank you so much, Zishan. And you know, you mentioned one very interesting thing that I will reiterate. So Zishan said that a 10% increase in women equals a 5% decrease in CO2 emissions for companies, which is extremely outstanding. So I'm very also happy to see that there are a few male gender champions in the room. So great group of people. I feel like we're in the perfect context. And I will now introduce my colleague Francesca, who is the gender and climate expert with IFC, to kind of set the stage for the engagement.
So, hi everyone. Thank you for that great introduction, Dalia, and also thank you for all of you for joining us today. As Dalia mentioned, it's so great to also see some men in the room. This is a topic for women, but also a topic for men. So very, very happy to see that. And Zishan, thank you for that great introduction. I think you really highlighted that gender and climate are key priorities for IFC, but also for Pakistan. And I hope to engage you today in a quick introduction as to how gender and climate are related, not just as individual priorities, but really in an integrated and intentional way. So most of you on this, in this room will recognize the image on the screen. And actually, this image was shared widely throughout the world. Many, many people saw this picture. And this is, of course, following the devastation in 2022 from flooding and also the extreme weather events that preceded the flooding events. And as most of you know in this room, this event caused major damage to the Pakistani economy. It destroyed schools. An estimated 22,000 schools had to close as a result of the flooding. It destroyed critical infrastructure such as roads and dams. And it also knocked out significant agricultural crops. So really the impacts were tremendous and estimated at roughly $15 billion. And that's a conservative estimate. Now, these types of events will become more severe and they will become more frequent as a result of the combined effects of climate change and the associated environmental degradation. So although many of us in this room are familiar with this, what many of you maybe don't know is the link to gender. And here there are really two big things that I will cover today. The first is that climate change impacts everyone, but it impacts girls and women to a more significant extent. And I will talk about why that is. The second aspect is that women and girls, if they are engaged and if their voices are activated, can play a significant role in securing Pakistan's more climate resilient future. And I'll talk about this as well. So I think before we start into the kind of meat of the discussion, which is the link between gender and climate, it's important to contextualize climate change for Pakistan. What does climate change mean for us in this context? And I think here it's always difficult to have this conversation, because how do you convey a sense of urgency, but still remain positive and also inspire action? So I'll start with the risks. I'll start with the bad news, but I'll also talk about the good news. So Pakistan is the 5th most populous country in the world, and it is consistently ranked in the top 10 countries when it comes to climate change vulnerability. Just to give you some statistics, it's estimated that by the end of the century, there will be on average 39 days that exceed the threshold of 35 degrees Celsius. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Sorry, thank you. That will exceed the threshold for 35 degrees Celsius. Secondly, another impact that demonstrates, or another statistic that demonstrates the impact of climate change is that the estimated effects on GDP as a result of changes to soil, of changes to the air, of changes to water, of agricultural productivity will impact the Pakistani economy by 18 to 20% by 2050. 18 to 20%, that's pretty significant. Now, acknowledging these impacts is one thing, right? We can talk about the risks. I think most of us know the risks of climate change. But what can we actually do about it? What can businesses sitting in this room today do about climate change today? And that's really where the opportunities come in and where some of the good news starts to come in. Because as I will demonstrate, action on climate change is not just about risk management. It's also about realizing new opportunities. When I worked at Boston Consulting Group in the global risk management team, a lot of companies were coming to us and asking us, what do we do about climate change? They were coming to us because they were concerned about their image. They were concerned about the reputational damage they would experience if they were appearing to do nothing about climate change. That was 5 years ago. I think we've come a long way from this very narrow risk assessment of climate change. We see, can you hear me? I think this is working. Maybe give me a nod. Okay, it's okay. Thank you. Okay, let me know if you, just wave if you can hear me, okay? Great. So at BCG, companies were coming to us and they really only saw climate change as a reputational risk. Since then, we've seen a lot of movement in this space, and companies are increasingly seeing climate change as a credit risk for financial institutions, as a physical risk, so the physical infrastructure effects of climate change on businesses, and as a transitional risk, transitioning your labor force, transitioning your people towards a more climate resilient future. On the other hand, companies are increasingly regarding climate change as an opportunity to expand into new markets, to develop new products, to innovate, and to create a community that is more equipped to address the effects of climate change. Businesses around the world are waking up to this reality. Markets are favoring greener products. Markets are also favoring companies that are more explicit about their action on climate change and sustainable practices. As a financier, an innovator, and a provider of goods and service, the private sector is critical in this. A recent report on the world's most innovative companies, so really the top performing companies in terms of pushing the curve in innovation, in technology, those are also the companies who are doing most on climate change and sustainability. And this is just one report. There is growing evidence that demonstrates the strong business case for acting on climate change. Okay, let's set climate change aside for just a moment, and I'll come back to it. Let's talk now about gender inequality. We know that Pakistan is really affected by climate change, but it is also impacted by gender inequality. And that is because women tend to experience outsized negative implications of extreme weather events, of flooding, of droughts, of all the negative consequences of a changing climate. And there are many, many reasons for this. But to summarize, women have a lower adaptive capacity. They are less equipped to respond to climate risks and challenges because they are underrepresented as leaders. They have less access to finance. They tend to be overrepresented in precarious livelihood generation. And this all renders them in a weaker position to act on climate. Let's investigate this gap a bit more in detail in the Pakistani context. So, as mentioned earlier, when we look at the statistics, it's quite troubling. So Pakistan ranks in 146th position out of 156 countries when it comes to gender inequality. And this on a range of measures in terms of economic participation and opportunity. When it comes to educational attainment, we see similar figures. Also, when we talk about the health and survival of women and girls. So the impacts of this are tremendous. To give you a few other statistics that, for me, really show this. Women make up 23%, or just 23% of women participate in the labor market versus 85% for men. This is a huge gap. And even when they are employed, women make 16 cents for every $1 that men make, on average. They are also underrepresented in non-technical positions, in management, on boards, in key decision-making positions. So, beyond this being fundamentally unjust, there is also an impact on the Pakistani economy. By some estimates, if you were to close the gender gaps across leadership, employment, consumption, if you were to shut those gender gaps, the Pakistani economy could grow by 30%, according to IMF. And this has huge impacts on businesses operating in this context. Our own research of IFC has continuously made a strong business case for better gender inclusion in terms of a business financial performance, in terms of recruiting a larger, wider, better equipped talent pool, in terms of having a social license to operate, and in terms of actual financial performance when it comes to return on sales, return on assets. Also in non-financial ways. Women at the seat of the table tend to communicate better. They improve a company's communication, problem-solving, innovation. And time again, we are seeing this in studies and reports and assessments across the globe. Okay, so we've talked about climate and why it makes sense for businesses to look at climate. And we've also talked about gender and why it makes sense for businesses to act on gender inclusion. But why do we put the two together? What is the value add in integrating your action on climate with your action on gender? And what do I even mean by this? What is gender-smart climate action? This is referring to some of the pledges you will make today. It is about ensuring that women are present in decision-making when a company is considering its climate strategy. It's ensuring that climate-friendly products and services reach women consumers and that their perspectives are considered in the design of those products and services. It's also ensuring that your supply chains are not only climate resilient, but also gender inclusive. And ultimately, for financial institutions, it's about extending financing and credit to women to improve their ability to respond to climate risks. This is really critical. So, the business case. Why should we do this? Why should businesses integrate action? And as Zishan and also Dalia mentioned, there are some really striking statistics about why you should do this. women are more likely to reduce energy consumption, GHG emissions, and water use if they're presented at decision-making tables within private companies. They are more likely to outperform their male counterparts when it comes to 8 out of 9 climate action indicators, and they're twice as likely to develop decarbonization strategies and allocate funding towards those strategies. Another study, similar to one that was mentioned, shows that a 1% increase in female senior management leads to a 0.5% decrease in CO2 emissions. And that might not sound like a lot, 0.5%, but just imagine every business in the room committing to increasing their female representation in management by just 1%. The impact would be quite enormous. Another key reason to elevate women's voices in climate action. Women are estimated to make 80%, upwards of 90% in Pakistan, of household purchasing decisions. And they tend to consume more sustainably and with the concerns of the larger community and family at mind. So, if businesses want to reach women consumers and access that market, they need to integrate women's voices. So, with this, I will conclude. We know that climate change is a massive risk here in Pakistan. We also know the importance of addressing gender inequality, especially here in this context. And I've now made a case for why integrated action can deliver additional benefits. It's really, really important to acknowledge that Pakistan historically has contributed virtually nothing to the global footprint of carbon. But it still confronts the reality that the climate is changing and it's impacting businesses, people, and communities. And businesses in this context are called to act. To give you an example, in the public sector, Pakistan is one of the first countries to develop a gender-inclusive climate action plan, which is huge. So I now call on you today to make your pledges and to elevate the call to action from the private sector as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fran. And just to add to what Fran was saying, you will find QR codes across the room throughout the event. Scan those codes and you'll find we've made it very easy for you, and we've listed a bunch of pledges that you can make. It's also okay to make your own pledge, to customize something that's based on whatever action your company has already taken or is taking. So please feel free to scan to learn more about the program and to make a pledge. And I would now like to invite Mr. Ehsan Malik to the stage to make his remarks, and after that we will be signing our memorandum of agreement with the Pakistan Business Council to solidify the program. Thank you.
So I think first an apology for being late here. One of the costs or the factors that affect our work at the Pakistan Business Council is that sometimes we are taking rather seriously. So we had a meeting, a very detailed agreement meeting with the government last week. We made a number of proposals to manage the current crisis that Pakistan faces. And lo and behold, as you probably know, there is some interaction between IMF and the Pakistan government on the sidelines of the Geneva conference, and our side wanted some clarifications. So I got involved in that, and then, as you know, there are a number of people that one has to interact with. So Pakistan Business Council, I think most of you will be aware, is really the premier business advocacy body in the country. We are very fortunate currently to have over 100 of the leading corporates in Pakistan who have joined us not so that we can look after their affairs, but actually joined us to help advocate a series of policies and to strengthen our advocacy and to enrich our knowledge of the sectors, because they come from 17 different sectors of the economy. Today, as we face, exports is one of the critical factors that can save us. And fortunately, 40% of the country's entire exports are generated by Pakistan Business Council members. Taxation is yet another factor, another key input that Pakistan lacks, and 1/3 of the total tax contributions are made by Pakistan Business Council members, and the combined turnover represents every 8th rupee of Pakistan's GDP. So we have a significant economic footprint. And about 5 years ago, we said if we have that kind of economic footprint, obviously the economic footprint was not as strong as it is today, but nevertheless it was quite strong at that point in time. And we said, let's bring it all together and do something to share some of the factors that led to the success of these businesses. And that's how the Center of Excellence in Responsible Business came about. And almost from the very first initiative that we took, we started collaboration with IFC on gender, and then we've continued on a couple of programs, and today we are here now trying to extend it from gender into climate. Of course, independently, we've also been working on climate for a while, but I think, all of us who live in Pakistan, I don't need to remind you how important climate or managing climate change is. We are seeing the repercussions of what's happening across the globe in our own country. Last year we saw it in terms of the floods. We've seen it earlier, and unfortunately we're likely to see it ongoing. But the important thing is that whilst the public sector may have taken a lead in signing the pledge, it is really the private sector at the end of the day that's going to make a significant difference if we want to shift the needle from responsibility. I just want to, I know we are running a bit late, I just want to share something, maybe it's anecdotal, from my own personal experience. As some of you know, I had the fortune, the privilege of leading the Pakistan business of Unilever for 9 years before I took on my current responsibility, and before that, I've spent about 16 years with Unilever in other parts of the world. And we found that for a consumer product company, and obviously it is logical, but I guess that logic did not apply throughout. But when I came back to this country in 2006, we said we are going to disproportionately hire more women. Fortunately, in Pakistan, Unilever faces no dearth of talent, in terms of applications. We get creme de la creme of the graduates from Pakistan and abroad applying for jobs. But we said we will hire 2/3 women for our 15 or 16 positions that we take on, and we never had to compromise on merit. And by the time I left in 2015, by the end of 2015, which is about 9 years later, the majority of our top team were women. So this can happen in just 6, 7, 8, or 9 years. I'm not saying that all of the people who were in the leadership positions at Unilever Pakistan came from the ones that we hired in 2006, but some of them did. And some of them have actually gone on to continue to lead. But it wasn't just because we wanted numbers. It was also because by hiring women, we could get closer to the consumer. And how is that relevant to today's event? It is relevant because women nurture. Men earn money, women nurture. And when you nurture, you take care of whatever you're trying to nurture. And so women take care, obviously, of the home, of their families, but beyond that, into societies, they're much more caring. And I think the overlap of gender and climate is really what today's program is all about. And we are hoping with IFC's collaboration and in fact with leadership of IFC to take it further and deepen this message across businesses, across private sector, and indeed the public sector. And we will do our bit to get our advocacy and our footprint to work together. So on that note, thank you very much for being here. I really urge you to sign on to the pledge, use the QR codes. There are other instruments here also, and we hope that we can together then start working on this. So thank you.
Mr. Zishan, can I call you to the stage, please? So we at IFC are very, very happy to continue our long-standing partnership with the PBC. We've been working with the Pakistan Business Council for 4 years or so on many different initiatives, primarily on gender. So very excited to launch the Climate2Equal initiative with the Pakistan Business Council. Let's go ahead. Yes, please. Thank you so much, and very excited to be launching this initiative. Thank you, Mr. And we will cut off for a very quick coffee break, but don't go anywhere because we will be talking more about the program and what's happening tomorrow. We're launching a workshop tomorrow, and we'd like you guys to be a part of it. So please feel free to have some tea and coffee, and we'll be waiting for you in about 15 minutes. Welcome you guys back to the room. Is everyone ready to start? We can give it like 1 or 2 minutes. And just by the way, this is a list of there was a list of all our pledges up on stage, all the example pledges that we're showing you. And if you look to the side here, these screens are always changing with ideas of pledges that you can also pledge. So there's very simple ones, and there's more complicated ones, and it depends what level you're at. But we believe that even the smallest action will really make a difference. So don't be afraid to pledge. I know things aren't 100% crisp clear at this point, but please don't be afraid to pledge. Take action, pledge, and we will hold your hand and walk you through the process from start to finish. So I'll just give it a few extra minutes, waiting for everyone to join. Wow, thank you for sticking through. And for now, we have a very exciting panel discussion ready for you guys. A mix of amazing experts that we'd like to invite on stage. And I will start by inviting Dr. Kulsoom Ahmed, who is a climate and environmental sustainability expert. She's also the director of the Integrated Learning Means ILM, a specialized consulting practice. She has over 30 years of experience in international development, climate and environmental sustainability, and previously has worked with the World Bank for around 24 years. So we have a gem in our hands. And I would also like to invite Ms. Meher Noshirwani, who's the chair of the Gender Specialist Group, Commission on Environmental, Economic and Social Policy, CESSP, International Union for Conservation of Nature. And Ms. Meher is a specialist on conservation and environmental management with a particular expertise on gender. She has over 30 years of experience as a consultant and researcher on gender and environmental issues. So she brings a unique and multi-stakeholder perspective to all her work. I would also like to invite Ms. Sadia Dada, who is the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for K Electric. Ms. Sadia, are you here? Okay. No worries. So Ms. Sadia is, brings to us a diverse and exciting wealth of experience in PR, advocacy, strategic communications, and crisis and reputation management, as well as building brand love, which is extremely important. Also, last but not least, and very importantly, because I love male gender champions, we are inviting to the stage Mr. Fahad Shenoy, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Pakistan Cables. He is currently the CEO of Pakistan Cables and has previously served in the banking industry with TD Securities in New York and Toronto, covering various responsibilities, including loan syndications and corporate banking. So this is our panel, and I'd like to invite to the stage now our moderator, Ms. Nazish Sheikha, who is the Head of Research at the Center of Excellence in Responsible Business, the CERB, with the Pakistan Business Center.
Can everybody hear me? Yep. All right. I'd like to welcome the esteemed panelists today for this important discussion. I'm very excited about this project, to be leading this project in CERB. I myself have a background in environment and social policy, so to see both these things together and looking towards it together is very important to me as well. I'd like to start off just by speaking of the project today. As you know, we're welcoming pledges from companies. We're very excited to have 2 companies here who've already made their pledges publicly with us on this platform. And we're also excited, actually, to have 2 experts who have more than 30 years of experience, who've actually seen the gender and environment journey obviously evolve, I think, globally. So would be very interesting to hear from both of you about this journey and to see how its relevance is in Pakistan as well. So I'm going to start off with Dr. Kulsoom. So building on the gender and climate nexus shared by Fran, and given your experience on climate and environment globally, how do you think environmental sustainability and climate change are interconnected in Pakistan as well?
Thank you, Nazish. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Dalia gave a very nice introduction about me, but actually, one thing I'm very proud of, I was actually the first woman manager in Glaxo, Pakistan in 1991. And that decision taken by Dr. Rashid Ahmed, the then CEO, led to where GSK is today, with a woman CEO and a chair of the board and lots of women in management. So yes, it is just a question of starting. And once you start, as Ehsan Malik also described for Unilever, things can move very, very fast. So I think it is particularly important, this discussion we're having today. Now, going to your comment on interconnectedness, I'm actually going to draw from the World Bank Group's recent Pakistan Climate Change and Development Report, an excellent report. If you haven't looked at it, I suggest you do. And some research that I've done with some professors at alums under the International Growth, funded by the International Growth Center out of LSE in the UK. Pakistan has a stunting rate of 38%. That's an average. When you look at it in more detail, you find that the lowest income quintile, 57% of children under the age of 5 are stunted. And at the highest income level, 22% of children are stunted. Stunting isn't just that you're short in height. It also means that your cognitive abilities, your IQ, your reasoning capabilities, those get reduced. You do worse in tests, educational tests, and you can never make that up. You can never fix that problem later in life. Now, why am I talking about this at this particular forum? Well, that's exactly where environment or environmental degradation in Pakistan and malnutrition it's a combination of the two. Not enough food, but also the inability of the body to absorb the food because you have diarrhea or because you have pneumonia. Those are the things that are actually causing stunting. Now, what impact does that have on businesses? Well, that's your labor force. That actually is where it hits you more than anywhere else. And then with climate, those things are exacerbated. We all, we've seen pictures of these awful floods, and the consequences still continue. And they're still talking about many years before they can actually return things to even where they were and then improve, get to more resilient development. In a rich country, when that happens, everything gets destroyed, but then there's the insurance industry, people have land rights. I mean, the thing gets built up. In a richer country, you suffer less. Let's be real about it. So climate just makes everything worse. And for companies, there's the whole labor force productivity issue, but then there's also additional issues linked with financial risk. Financial risk in the context of, well, take agriculture. Agriculture is, employs 40% of the labor force in this country. It's also a major exporting sector. But yet, the 30% or 35% of irrigated lands are waterlogged. We have salinity in another 30%. So that means productivity is very low. Now, with climate, you're going to have droughts, you're going to have floods, all at the time when you don't necessarily want them. The temperature is going to change, the growing season of the crops is going to change, so thinking about what crops to grow, how to grow them, and then that already environmental degradation is further exacerbated by climate. So that's just one example. Now, let me just briefly talk of urban areas, and then I'll turn back to Nazish. On the urban areas, it's really transport and energy are the two big issues. As we've talked about greenhouse gas emissions, and that's where they come from, even though Pakistan is a very low emitter. But the issue is not so much that, it's actually what's happening in terms of the rest of the world. So the EU, for example, a few days ago, passed what they call, it's basically a border carbon tax. They call it the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. It's going to kick in 2026. And essentially, initially it's iron and steel, cement, aluminium, fertilizer, hydrogen, but it will be other products later. What they are trying to ensure is if their own industries are much more efficient, energy efficient, then they want to ensure a level playing field for them. They don't want things to come from a country where they can be much more, use much more energy and have much worse environmental standards and bring that stuff into the EU at a lower price. So they'll apply a carbon border tax to level the playing field. So this is just first mover's advantage. If you, as a business, think about tackling some of these issues, for example, energy efficiency, being much more efficient, then you're actually setting up your products to be exportable. So there is a first mover advantage there too. Let me stop there because I've talked about two very different things, and I'm happy to get into both later. Just one addendum though. Energy and transport is primarily responsible for the lousy air quality we have in all our cities, and that makes Pakistan one of the top 10 countries in the world with the worst air quality. Much more than China. We all used to talk about China. Actually, Karachi is worse than Beijing. Forget Lahore. And doing something about energy efficiency will help climate, but it will also make the air cleaner, and then even affect that stunting issue that I talked about earlier. So,
yes, obviously there is a lot of interconnectivity, and linking human health and the environment, and then obviously productivity. All three of these three things go together. So building on this, and what Fran has also mentioned in the TED Talk, how does climate action and gender resonate with your research on how women in Pakistan are adversely impacted by climate change, Meher? And how can a diverse point of view ensure a more holistic approach towards climate action is taken in the private sector?
Thanks, Nazish. Is this on? It's on already? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nazish. Thank you for inviting me here and for someone hearing it. This is exciting to see this program being developed in Pakistan as well. Can you hear me at the back? I'm not sure if it's on. Is it on? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Nazish. Nazish, I want to go back to, yes, what I've heard in the room so far and what the speakers have said. To focus on the linkage between gender and climate change and environment, I think the fundamental, what we need to know and understand is what is the link, why women, why gender? And some people we've already heard some of that today. But from us, from those of us who have worked in the environmental sector and the social sector for many years, what we recognize is that because women are primarily responsible for the family, primarily responsible for food, water, food security, and ensuring responsibilities within the family, it is therefore they are closest to the natural resources. In Pakistan, which is predominantly a rural country, women are responsible for water, for looking for it, for livestock, for fodder, for collection of fuel. And it is that closeness to the environment, closeness to the natural resources that make women primarily managers of the natural resource. Therefore, when climate change has an impact on environmental degradation and increases it, women are disproportionately affected by climate change. And that is the fundamental link between why climate change is not gender neutral, why women are affected more and impacted more by climate change, because it is the women who are the ones who have to go and look for water, who have to walk longer distances, who spend more time searching for water when climate change impacts it, when there is deforestation, when there is a lack of fodder. It is the women who have to go out to do that type of work. It increases their burden, it increases their time spent ensuring food and water within the home, because it is women's responsibility. And it is that gender aspect that has to be considered. That is the link between women, environment, natural resources, and climate change. And so therefore, whatever climate change brings as an impact, that's what happens, it impacts women. So that's the fundamental link or circle, why gender and climate change and what the linkages are. Given the research that we've done recently, which I've done with IUCN, which I've done in the social sector with various organizations that I continue to work with. One of the things that we have found when we did a gender analysis of in Keti Bandar and in Gwadar, and we looked at the impact of climate change over there, What emerges from the grassroots, what emerges from the field is that extreme weather, which we all experience now, the heat, increased temperatures, which is difficult to adapt to, which people have to adapt to, shorter winters, and then changes in rainfall patterns. The monsoons have shifted. They're no longer predictable. So farmers particularly say that they can't, their traditional ways of sowing, of planting, of harvesting have all changed. They don't have the knowledge and the technical capacity to respond to that. They don't know when to sow, they don't know when to think, because things have changed, because of the changing monsoon patterns. The rainfall has changed. Women particularly say that in the past the rain fell gently. Now it's harsh. It destroys the seedlings. It destroys the plants. They have noticed a change between the kind of rainfall. When we want to go into climate change, what are the actual nuances? How do they perceive a change? They perceive it in terms of the increase in temperatures. They perceive it in terms of how cold it is, how the shorter seasons, changing in seasons. And these are the ways that women and men perceive climate change, their perceptions in terms of what they see. So these are the kind of things that come out in the data and in the research. Fall in fish catch in the coastal areas, in the creeks, monsoons, rainfall, weather, predominantly weather, and how they then have to adapt to that in terms of the extreme heat and the extreme temperatures, which again destroy crops and has an impact on health as well. So these are the this is the sort of data that we've generated and which just comes out in climate change, which we have to. So people have to be given the, increase their capacity to be able to adapt to this type of, to changes that take place. And finally, as somebody mentioned earlier also, Pakistan does have now a climate change gender action plan. IUCN and the Ministry of Climate Change have developed that. It's now been launched. It was launched last year. There is their provincial strategies that are being developed. I think it's already in KP, and in Punjab they have been launched, if I'm correct, if I remember that. But, and that is a response to climate change. So we have a gender action plan now. There are different sector papers, water, agriculture, food security, which outline a plan for Pakistan over the next so many years. And it incorporates gender within that. The documents are available, and I think that's the plan that we are following. Thanks, Nazish. Okay. I can say more later.
Okay, Sadia, good to have you on the platform here today. So, KE is one of the important, obviously, key companies in the private sector of Pakistan. And how has your company taken action to promote gender diversity in your company? And, you know, we'll talk about how relevant is it for companies such as yours in general to take improve decision making, and how does gender improve decision making towards, you know, things like climate action and, you know, impact on the environment and society?
Thank you, Nazish. Very happy to be here. So before I go into you know, what K Electric is doing about this, I just wanted to put a couple of numbers out there. A few months ago, the World Economic Forum mapped 20 sectors, and they looked at the representation of women in leadership. And the energy sector is the third worst to be in for women leaders. They put the number at 1 out of 5. I think it's skewed by Europe and the West. I joined the power sector in 2016. Right before that, I was a part of Ehsan's team and learned a lot from him, applied a lot of that to what I'm doing here. And in 2016, when I walked into a room, I was, and I don't know how many of you can relate, 1 out of 20, 1 out of 50. At one point, it was 1 out of 400. They were so scared that they made me come up all the way in front because they're like, you know, she'll get lost somewhere in the room. I use the word lost very politely. And so from that perspective, there's a lot of room to work. When you're looking at integrating gender into mainstream corporate sector, and particularly the private sector, I kept repeatedly hearing this. There's a lack of talent. There's a lack of, you know, available female resources. Women go to engineering colleges and they don't end up joining the workforce. That inspired me to start an online networking community of women. And in 5 years, there's 10,000 women on it. So there's definitely no lack of talent. And you know, I think we need to sort of move beyond these excuses or whatever it is to bring as many women to the forefront. From the time that K Electric embarked on this journey, we've increased the representation of women in our senior positions. We've also made a lot of changes to our policies and the way we operate, from ensuring that there's 4-month mat leave, there is you know, a career progression for all the female leaders. We've also put a number to the number of women, you know, the percentage of women when we hire new recruits. Last year, 35% of the new recruits in the management trainee program, 35%. But that's not enough. I mean, so you've got to create a whole pipeline. So we put that structure in place, so bringing in women leaders, then hiring fresh recruits, but also at the grassroots. Now, the power sector, the canvas is huge. But we're a 10,000 people company. If I put the percentage of women in the company versus the rest of the company, we would not stand out. But putting women in leadership positions helped us ask this one question. You know, why do we not have female meter readers? Why do we not have women working in the grids? Why do we not have women working on the lines? We have an apprenticeship program that's been running for years. How come there aren't any women in it? And we started asking those questions. I'm very happy to share. We have the country's first female meter readers. We have now women working on the grids. We have women applying to apprenticeship programs. And we also have women doing door knocking and a safety ambassador program called the Roshni Bajis. So we equip them with STEM training, but I think more important for them is sort of getting a training in confidence, in sort of having somebody to hold their hand and showing them that, you know, yes, it's a big bad world out there, but you can do it. So it's a 6-month program, and that sort of creates the pipeline of future female recruits. So a bit of every single layer of the journey. We also want to make sure that there are future women leaders. So there's a returnship program which allows women who have taken a break from their careers to return back to work. That kind of allows us to fill the gap between leaders and the new recruits. So there's a middle pie that is now growing. We have had, over the course of past few months, more than 15 women have joined the program, graduated out, and there's a fresh induction. So that kind of keeps a steady pipeline. Now coming to renewables. When I spoke about the fact that the energy sector is the 3rd worst for women leaders, there is a ray of hope. IRENA put out a report which says that the renewable sector, particularly solar, is leading as far as the women representation is concerned. It's at 40%, which is very reassuring, which means that there is scope, room, and there's definitely a lot of hope, and again, a lot of catching up for Pakistan to do. When you're looking at the representation of women in climate change, and I know Kulsoom Saiba talked a lot about the importance and how women bring a lot more different decision-making pointers and perceptions to climate change, as well as when you're setting up renewables. I think one of the biggest elephants in the room is, when you're looking at setting up renewables, is displacement of indigenous people. And this is a factor, you know, when we're having these conversations, it is extremely important to have the female members of the community participate in those conversations. It's also very important that we don't brush all women under one stroke. There are different kinds of women in different stages of life. So yes, the majority of them are looking for water and wood. There are women who are looking for economic independence. There are women in different stages of life. You know, there are some whose sons have migrated to the cities, and they are now at home looking for something to bide their time. And when we're talking about putting up solar powers, I'd love to see a solar company pledging that when they put up a solar power plant, predominantly in our part of the world, they will be in a rural area, to include women into the operations and maintenance. I think it's the easiest thing for us to do. Making sure that there is some kind of pledge. So we've put that in our pledge, that we would like to include more women when we're looking at setting up solar power plants. There is a solarization policy, 10,000 megawatts, a huge room. Ehsan, when you talk next to the government, maybe you can slide that in. It really make a huge difference. Because when you go into the rural areas and you sit down with these women, they want to, you know, be close to a school, for example. I've spoken to men, they want to be next to a road where the, you know, the bus is passing by, there's a chai dhaba, but the women are looking for, you know, near a school, near a water source, near a hospital, and those are the considerations. So better impacts, more perceptive. Men just need a little bit more coaching on that front. So when you're looking at risks, I think leaving the women out of the conversation is actually the biggest risk that we stand to face. Including them, and including them at every single level. So not just at the top and not just at the bottom, but across the value chain. That's what I would say. Thank you.
So moving on to Mr. Fahad Chinoy, we've heard from Sadia of the needs of having women in the energy sector. So I'd like to now focus on climate action. And as a premier cable manufacturing company in Pakistan and a market leader in Pakistan for this, what sort of actions have you taken towards the climate? And I'm also aware that you've signed up the Business to Ambition for Net Zero pledge as well. So could you tell us a little more about that? And why is it important for your organization to take gender-inclusive company-led climate action?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And secondly, it's really nice to be in the minority today, something I'm not used to. So we had a preview of the 2022 floods in 2020. You know, I think a lot of you remember the rains that happened in Karachi. And our company was specifically very badly hit. You know, we're at the end of a very long road. And over the years, the factories around us have sort of built higher ground. And so all the water in sight essentially sort of drains through our factory at times. And we're surrounded by two water drainage nalas. And what happened during those rains was that the nalas essentially backwashed into our factory, and around 60% of our equipment was underwater, around 3 feet of water. This is all electronic equipment, motors, all sorts of stuff. So that was a massive wake-up call for us, not only from an existential perspective for our factory or our company, but also in terms of what sort of impact we could have on the environment. In parallel, we were building a new facility at this time, and the first thing that we did within this new facility is in Nooriabad. It's essentially a desert area, is that we started putting up an urban forest on 3 acres right in the middle of the factory, which is going to be always dedicated towards this forest. And it is, I think in our assumption, the largest urban forest in an industrial setting in Pakistan. We have now over 40,000 trees planted. It's flourishing, ecosystem of, you know, birds and butterflies and snakes and all sorts of things have developed within it. And that sort of then triggered our direction in terms of what else we wanted to do in sustainability, because we realized the impact that it had both internally in terms of the narrative we were selling to our own people, the culture change we are trying to develop within the organization, but also we started to advocate this externally as well, and we got a great response. I think 2 or 3 other companies have since then started very closely looking into putting up their own urban forests. But in parallel, we were doing other things like bringing in new technology into Pakistan that essentially, without getting too technical, assists in reducing line losses, which again is a green technology, a certified green technology, for which the utilities will eventually, once they buy into this product, should have a major impact on reduction in carbon emissions. We are supporting the solar sector with products. And what we're trying to do internally is really build a 360-degree approach towards sustainability by engaging our people on sustainability initiatives. So there are other urban forests in which our people have been, as a part of our employee voluntary program, going and planting trees. We've had an art contest for the kids and the importance of forests, and so on and so forth. So that there's not just our impact as an institution, but that the people who work with their families, etc., everyone has a broader impact into it. And when we talk about diversity, so there are these two parallels taking place, right? There's the focus on sustainability, which has sort of been organic and has grown over time as a response to what we had, and then further on as a response to what we've seen since then. But on the D&I side, essentially, our board has been very passionate and has been driving, a D&I focus, and our human resource committees end up being, maybe half the time is spent on, what are we doing on diversity. And what we did was, we've multiplied the number of female colleagues that we have in our team. But what we've really focused on is sort of creating that as a trigger for culture change in terms of how the organization operates, and then how you interface with other platforms like sustainability. A lot of this has happened organically. One example is my colleague Mariam, who's sitting over here. Mariam Durrani, has been with us for a long time. She's our head of marketing and brands, and she's in a leadership role within the company. But as things evolved, her passion for sustainability essentially started to drive a lot of the other sustainability programs or focus just purely on the basis of her interest. And I think some of the statistics that were shared early on today, really sort of reinforce the impact that female leadership can have in the organization, and their perspective, which may be different from male leadership, particularly around issues like sustainability and environment. So we are investing a lot in various different programs. One of the ones that we like the most is what we call Ascend, in which we have 6 female electrical engineers from NED who come in every summer and every winter. We give them real life practical issues in which environment and climate change is going to be, or is already, one of them. And then they are engaging with our teams to sort of problem solve those issues. So we're doing a host of various different things on both fronts. But this event today really has sort of brought home to me that the convergence of having a D&I mandate that's robust with a sustainability platform that focuses on climate change, how does one really bring that together? And that's got me thinking. And I think the pledges, and if you read into some of them, help set a framework in one's mind as to how you can actually structure this in a way whereby you can get the most out of both areas. So I think it's a great initiative on behalf of the IFC and the PBC for setting us up with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Fahad. Now we're sort of getting toward the end of the panel discussion, and I would like to ask each panelist, what are your hopes for the future with regards to gender-inclusive business-led climate action? And what would you like to see happen in 5 years from now? And what active measures do you think the private sector can take for this? All right.
Sure. So I think that I think platforms like these help a lot because I think we can learn a lot from one another, and this is the way through which one can sort of share learnings. There can be case studies, and there should be some form of cohesion, right? In terms of not everyone, but various different institutions are working in pockets, but where do we bring together the highest impact initiatives? So I think there needs to be some learning, after which then we focus on those initiatives where we prioritize, which are the lowest hanging fruits with the highest amount of impact. And so I would hope that this sort of platform can drive that direction, both within the private sector, but also influence policy at the government level as well, because I think the people around the room today can really have that influence.
So one should always remain hopeful, so I'll try to be. But I envision a future which is more fluid and a lot more agile. I mean, 100, maybe 100, 150 years ago, somebody decided that we're going to have a 40-hour work week. Why are we still stuck to it? Somebody needs to rethink it. I think the corporate work week it needs a bit of a redesign. I think some people are already onto it. So we've got agile working, we've got flexible timings, and I'm hoping that 5 years from now, companies will stop with the 9 to 5 business and focus more on productivity, on KPIs, and they will accommodate the needs of working women that include, hopefully, they will be shared by their counterparts by then, but at this point in time, most women, the pick and drop of children, school timings, lunch, PTAs. So a lot more flexibility in physical availability on premise is something that I hope we will do away with in 5 years. And hopefully the number for women in leadership will be a lot more better. The trend is very promising. So I'm looking forward to a more equitable and a more equal future, particularly in the corporate sector.
Thank you.
Thanks, Najesh. I think I'll just build on that by saying that yes, women in decision-making positions, that's what I'd like to see for the next over the next 5 years. In key positions with decision makers, and then across all the sectors within the corporate sector. And also a greater understanding within businesses about gender issues, so that gender can be mainstreamed right from the start. And gender should not be seen as an add-on or something that just has to be done. So there has to be an increase of awareness and an understanding of why is it important, why is it essential that we must include women at all stages of the processes, from planning to project design. Only if that happens, then one can actually see gender mainstreaming take place. And then it's a question of equity as well, women's access to resources. So therefore, companies have to build in financial resources into their budgets right from the start, so that that takes gender considerations in mind, and there's an resource allocation for activities specifically for gender and climate change. So those are the things I would like to see: a greater understanding, more awareness within companies, and a lot more training for both men and women. Because just having women in numbers is not enough. They need to know why they're there. And men are supporters, champions, changers, and decision makers, and they have to buy into it. And if the companies don't buy into why gender is important, we won't see it happen. Okay, thanks.
Yes, sensitization is a very important part of the discussion. Thank you. Kulsum, Dr. Kulsum.
I agree with all my fellow panelists. So I'm actually going to say I'm hopeful because of the conversation I had in the coffee preceding this session. I spoke to a lot of people who were telling me what amazing things they were doing. And rather than me take more time, let me invite 2 or 3 people to put up their hand and tell us in literally 2 sentences something that you've been doing on the gender front, and particularly the gender and climate front together. Could 2 or 3 people put their hands up? If not, Nazish will end up calling on them. Okay.
Yes.
My name is Farheen Zahoor. I'm head of strategy at Artistic Garment Industries. We are first B Corp certified company in Pakistan, and I'm really proud to say that we have 25% representation of women amongst the owners, and we have 36% women across all our group. Out of that, 5.2% are at the managerial level. And our company has set a goal that we want gender balance across all managerial levels. We are providing daycares. We're providing flexible hours to our women, and I'm one of the example. I enjoy 3 working days and in a week, because the company wants to set example, especially for the women who are in the childbearing age, so that they can come back to work and they can continue their life. So we believe on gender equity more than gender equality. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's have one example, the gentleman at the back there.
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate today's initiative for the Climate2Equal. I am representing Khadi as their CFO, and I am proudly say that I am in minority in Khadi, and the more than 70% workforce represent women's. And even in addition to this, I would like to share with all of you that company had a very wonderful, beautiful head office in the site industrial area. But due to the problem highlighted by our women force, that they were feeling some commutation problem and going to the site industrial area, company had decided to incur a capex of more than 600 million rupees to set up a new head office within the city area near Clifton Defense in order to provide the full facilitation beyond the imagination to our women gender diversity. So I am proud of this today, that Khadi is one of the name where women gender would like to prefer any other employer. Thank you so much.
Okay, since we've had one of each gender, we'll stop there. I just want to finish with just some research that I conducted with Dr. Farah Sayed, who's a professor at LUMS. And we were looking at the various surveys that Pakistan does. And it is interesting that, at least officially, 25% of women at the lowest income quintile work. And they work because of need, you know, to feed their families. And then they use that money, if there is extra money, for actually girls' education, because boys' education does get preference. And then when you look at the highest income quintile, it's only 7% of women that work. And it literally is a straight line, you know, going from 25% down to 7. And when you actually look at all the surveys in terms of whether women want to work, what are the things that hold people back, and of course you have all the usual things of safety and transport and so on. But actually the underlying factor is culture. You know, it literally is in terms of this kind of asking permission from husbands and also not really being economically empowered. And yet we all know, anybody who's worked in development knows that one of the key indicators for a country to go from developing to developed is the level of women's economic empowerment. So actually, I think the companies that are associated with the Pakistan Business Council actually have a special role, because I think the only way to change culture is actually to have women in the highest income quintile, who are the ones who have that education and so on, to work. If they do that, it'll actually change the culture down the chain, and actually the women who are really working, the ones in the fields at the lowest income quintile, aren't being acknowledged for it, aren't being paid properly for it, aren't being compensated, and all of that will change, because you cannot, it's actually very difficult to try and enforce that, to make sure women at that level are paid properly. If you fix things at the highest level, that culture permeates down. So, and everything is interconnected at the end of the day. So let me end with that.
Thank you to the panelists here. I'm glad we've had this conversation, and it's highlighted a number of important things to come out. Firstly is obviously both things are connected. The environment and gender are connected. I'm just going to share a little story. I have known Meher for a long time, I think says around 10 years. And when I met her, she was giving a session, and she talked about this Chipko movement. And this was a movement in India. Meher, I think you should tell the story. about it to the people. It basically connects the gender environment very clearly.
Thank you, Nazish. It's a very famous, well-known environmental grassroots movement known as the Chipko movement, which took place in the northern regions of India many, many years ago in the lower foothills of the Himalayas, where there was the threat of cutting the forests. And there was a group over there that actually wanted to cut the forests for deforestation, for fire, for whatever, industrial purposes. And the communities around that, the women of the communities in that particular area decided to hug the trees or put their arms around the trees, because the trees were basically their sources of livelihood. That is where they got the forests, they got everything came from the forests. And they said that if the forests are destroyed, then our livelihoods would be destroyed as well. So in order to stop that, what they did is they put their arms around the trees and hugged them. So it was literally called Chipko. So therefore they said, if you have to kill us first before you destroy the trees. And that led to a very large environmental movement. And it then took off in different parts of the world as well. So it's known as the Chipko movement. It's there it's available if anyone wants to read about it. But it's something that I remember telling Nazish about many years ago, because that shows the connection between women and between their understanding of their dependency on the natural resource and how much it means to them. That they knew that without that resource, their livelihoods wouldn't continue. So they wanted to save it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Meher. Basically, it shows the idea of nurturing, and the idea that, Mr. Hasan Malik also said that when we're in that sort of a environment, even in the at decision-making positions in workplaces, we have a different way of thinking. So diversity brings, better decision-making, and this is, the importance of this project that we're taking on at the PBC and with IFC. So I'd like to ask Dalia to come, and then we're going to ask all the pledging companies that have already pledged to come and have a photograph, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Okay, first I'd like to ask you guys, who here has actually used the QR code to pledge today? Amazing, thank you. I see a hand in the back too, right? Yes, 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 yes. So we'd love for you to join us on stage if you've used the QR code, and I will just recognize a few companies that have already pledged before the event. And two things. So before leaving, we would like for you to use the QR code, either to learn more about what we're doing or to actually pledge. And if you've pledged and haven't registered for tomorrow's workshop, let us know. So I'm available. There's Zara over there, Fran, our PBC team, Nazish, Samin, Raja, and Atiya. We're all here for you guys. So if you have any questions, if you're not so sure about what to pledge or what to do, if you just want to learn more, please feel free to approach us. We'll be around. And another thing is, each of you, I think, has a survey on your desk. It's very short. It'll take 10 seconds. Your feedback is extremely, extremely important to us. Why? Because before we had this event, we were talking about actually conducting two different streams of workshops, right? One of them was like, maybe people won't be that interested in the topic, so we'll do a lot of awareness raising. And the other was, if we have a lot of interest, then we'll dig deep into the topic. So after speaking to a lot of you guys during the break, and after hearing what some of you had to say, we feel like, yes, this is definitely a go. We're in the right place. We're doing the right thing. We're talking about the right things, right? So your feedback is very important to us. Please don't leave without filling out these forms, right? And now I would like to invite to the stage the following companies: Artistic Milliners, the Coca-Cola Company, Daraz, National Foods Limited, TPL Corp, PTCL Group, Pakistan Cables Limited, H. Nizam Din and Sons, AGI Denim, K Electric, and Bank Al Falah. in addition to the companies that have used the QR code to pledge. And let's take a picture, right?
And also Hassan Malik.
And Mr. Hassan Malik, of course. We cannot do this without you. Who's here? Should I say the companies, the names out again? Let's do this. And these companies, I just want to say, we want to recognize you guys as thought leaders. We want to recognize you as leaders in the field. And we're very happy to have you show and demonstrate what the private sector can do. Is anyone else joining? Excellent. Are we all in the picture? Amazing. Thank you, guys. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. And I will hand the mic over to my colleague Nazish to do her closing remarks. And then we invite you guys to lunch and an hour of chit-chatting and networking. Would love to get to know each one of you personally. So here you go.
So I'm going to do very short closing remarks because you just heard me speak through the panel discussion. Just like to say that I'm really excited by the energy in the room. It's good to have all the stakeholders together here. And we look forward to take this journey forward. Do let us know. I mean, even if you're not a pledging company, we will be having sessions to take this further. So do let us know about your interests. We're also very interested in learning about where climate action is taking you. A lot of companies here have also signed up to the SBTI and Business Ambition for Climate Action Pledge. So we'd like to hear where you are on your journeys on this. My team is always available for support as well. So look forward to working with you guys on this. And lunch is ready.
Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to talking more.